This lesson will discuss handling a variable number of parameters. Topics include, why would you want to define a function with a variable number of parameters? How do you define a function with a variable number of parameters? And if you do not specify any parameters in the function definition, how do you gain access to them? Moving over to our code example, as you can see, we've got a function called preferences row, which is designed to produce a row of 10 table data columns with a variable number of items. On line 7, we initialize a variable called $output, which is then returned on line 21. On line 9, the key is to use a function called func_get_args. This is a PHP function that returns all of the parameters supplied to the function in the form of an array. On line 11, we initialize a variable called maxCols, which is assigned a value of 10. This is used as a control to make sure that we have 10 columns that are filled. On line 13, we go through the parameter array using a for each loop. We then use the concatenate equals operator to add to the output a table data cell, which represents the item. On line 15, we decrement the number of columns. After the loop, because we don't know exactly how many columns were filled, if there are any columns left, we loop through the remaining columns by using a for loop. Now again, you may recall the difference between for and other types of loops is that for is useful when you have a fixed number of values. In this case, the number of values is the number represented by $maxCols. On line 19, we simply add to the output a table data cell with a non-break space. This output is then returned, and on lines 24 through the end of the program, as you can see, we are producing 2 rows of data, one for Tarzan, one for Jane, and we can see the preferences for Tarzan are as follows here, and the preferences for Jane, as you can see, the number of preferences differs. And because you'll notice on line 4, we did not define any parameters at all. Rather, the parameters are obtained on line 9 using func_get_args. So no matter how many parameters we supply, as you can see on line 28 and line 32, any parameters supplied will be returned by func_get_args. Let's now move over to the browser and have a look at the results. So as you can see, we've got an HTML table with a fixed number of columns where the number of parameters varies, and then the remaining columns are just simply filled in with blank spaces. So now we have a list of preferences for Tarzan and a list of preferences for Jane. In review, why would you want to define a function with a variable number of parameters? There may be times when you are not sure of the exact number of values which might be passed to a function. For example, you might be performing a database query. You might be analyzing information coming in from a spreadsheet that's uploaded by the user, for example. So in such situations, it might be useful to use the technique discussed. How do you define a function with a variable number of parameters? The answer is you define your function with no parameters listed at all inside the parentheses. Of course, if you don't specify the parameters, how do you gain access to them? The answer is you use a PHP function func_get_args, which takes all of the parameters, as many as are supplied, and returns them in the form of an array. This concludes our discussion of handling a variable number of parameters.